Hello, everyone. On this podcast episode, I'm going to continue talking about atoms again and absolute zero and perspective. From the previous episode, I talked about how scientists need to be cautious with atoms. From one perspective, atoms at absolute zero stops moving, right? From another perspective, atoms at absolute zeros, you know, are the hottest they've ever been. Is when they've moved, it's when they move the most. From one perspective, when an atom is at its hottest, it's when it moves the most, right? From another perspective, it's also when it's the coldest. And this world is a world of perspective. So let me give you a reference point to what I'm trying to say. From this point of view, if you stand still, right? And you look ahead of you, in front of you, right? And then you look to your left and to your right. Your left will be on your left, your right will be on your right. So let's say your left is cold and your right is hot, right? If you stand still and you look to your left side of you will be cold, non-movement, or absolute zero. The right side of you will be hot, right? Or extreme heat, infinite degrees. But if you turn around and go the opposite, and look the opposite direction, then 180, turn 180 degrees around, what do you have? The moment you flip your perspective, absolute zero, your left side becomes what? Your right side. And your right side becomes your left side. Perspective determines what's left and what's right. Your left side is both your right side and your left side simultaneously as one. Your right side, what you call your right, is both your right and your left simultaneously as one. Perspective determines whether your right side is on the right or whether your right side is actually on the left. When you're standing forward, your left side will be on your left. Your right side will be on your right. When you stand backwards, when you just turn back and stand backwards, face backwards, your left side is now on your right and your right side is now on your left. So perspective determines what's on the right and what's on the left. Perspective determines what's positive and what's negative. If you hold a magnet, the left side is positive, the right side is negative, right? If you take another magnet and add to it, the left side of that magnet changes. The positive side of a magnet, now, if you add another magnet to a magnet, you see that it elongates. The part that used to be negative, it depends on where you add it. If you add the positive side to a negative side of a magnet, right? The negative side of a magnet no longer becomes negative, because now a magnet has a new negative. The end of the new magnet that you've created becomes the negative side, and the left side of the magnet that you added becomes the positive side. So I know it's hard to show it, to visualize it, but if the left side of a magnet is positive and the right side of a magnet is negative, right? You take another magnet and you add the positive side of that magnet, which is on the left side, to the right side of the old magnet. They come together, right? They attract. That middle point where they attract, that part is now both positive and negative. The old magnet, that side was positive. On the old magnet, the side was negative, sorry. The old magnet, the right side is negative. The new magnet that you added to it, the side is positive. When these two magnets come together, the middle point where they meet will be called what? Positive and negative. And that's how this world works. Perspective determines what's positive or negative. From the perspective of water, room temperature is pretty warm. That's why water is, it's liquid at room temperature. From the perspective of iron, room temperature is very cold. This is why iron is solid at room temperature. Iron only becomes liquid when the temperature gets hotter. And when the temperature gets hotter, water becomes gas. Perspective determines what's hot and what's cold. From our perspective, absolute zero is the coldest. But that's only from our perspective. From a different perspective, absolute zero is the hottest. Don't you find it weird that, helium doesn't behave the same way as other atoms? The helium atom does not behave the same way as other atoms at absolute zero. Because absolute zero is perspective based. What we call absolute zero may not truly be absolute zero. Every element, every atom has its own absolute zero. Everything in this world is based off perspective. From our perspective, absolute zero is absolute zero. From a different perspective, absolute zero, it's at its highest. It's at its highest temperature. And this is why scientists need to be cautious. They may think they're reducing, they're making an atom colder. But the truth is they could be making the atom hotter instead. From one perspective, your left is on your left and your right is on your right. If you just stand the equal and opposite way, the equal and opposite direction, your left switches from your left to your right. Perspective determines what's hot and what's cold. From our perspective, when the atom is at its highest, is also from a different perspective when the atom is at its coldest. If you're standing in front of someone, right, and someone is standing in front of you, their left side is your right, and your right side is their left. And this is how this world works. If you're standing in front of someone, and they're standing in front of you, you guys are looking at each other, right? Your left is their right. Your cold is their hot. And their hot is your cold. What we consider our left is what something else considers its right. What we consider our right is what someone else considers its left. What we consider cold is what something else considers hot. What we consider hot is what something else considers cold. And this is how this world works. And this is why, I tell scientists to be cautious, is because they may not be doing what they think they're doing. They may think they're making an atom stop moving. But the truth is, from a different perspective, they're just building pressure within an atom. When you take air, right, in a container and you just squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it, you're thinking, from your point of view, you're stopping the gases within that, within the air from moving, right? Because if you squeeze it and squeeze it, there's less space for the gas to move, right? When you take a container filled with air and you just squeeze it, make it smaller and smaller and smaller. From your perspective, you're just making it, you're stopping those atoms from moving, right? You're making them solid. From a different perspective, you're doing the equal and opposite. You're building pressure. You're making them move even faster. If you make them move faster, fast enough, your container may not be able to hold them. That container may not be able to hold them. If that container can't hold those atoms, they will explode from the container. And that's what's going to happen. The closer you get to absolute zero, the more you build pressure within an atom. The moment you get to absolute zero, could be, the moment the atom explodes. Too much pressure has been built within it. Too much pressure has been built within it. This is what you need to be cautious of. You may think an atom, nothing happens. nothing will happen when an atom gets to absolute zero. But the fact that it gets harder and harder to get an atom to absolute zero the closer you get to it. The closer you get to an absolute zero, the harder it is to get to absolute zero. What does that tell you? It has, it's following the same principle as when you force gas, when you shrink gas up inside a container, the more you shrink the gas, the harder it is to shrink the gas. If you take the gas, you put it in a container, and you just squeeze that gas, right? You shrink the container small, more and more. The more you squeeze that container, the harder it is to squeeze. The more you squeeze it, the harder it is to squeeze, to a point where the container may not be able to contain all the gas. The gas will be moving so fast within that container. The pressure will build up so fast, so much within that container, that the container itself may not be able to contain what? The gas within it. And and scientists are following the same process. The harder, the closer you get to absolute zero, the harder it is to get to absolute zero. It's as if you're building pressure within that atom. There's a high chance the closer you get to absolute zero, the closer you get to creating a massive nuclear explosion. At some point in time, pressure will build up so much that it'll have to escape. It'll have to go somewhere. All that energy that's building up within that atom has to go somewhere. The atom has to rotate. The atom has to vibrate. The atom has to move. The more you stop an atom from moving, the more you're putting pressure on it. Just like the more you stop at gas, the more you shrink a gas particles, the more pressure is building up. The more you shrink, a container filled with gas, the more pressure builds up. If you don't have a strong enough container to hold that gas in, the gas will explode. The container will explode. And that's what's going on. If the atom itself isn't strong enough, isn't powerful enough to hold, the extreme pressure of absolute zero, it'll explode. And when it explodes, you may not want to be around when it explodes. But atoms are very small anyways. Since atoms are very small, you may not have that much of an impact. But we also have to be cautious, because absolute zero is also when it's also the highest temperature. Absolute zero also means absolute heat, extreme heat. The hottest something can get is also the coldest it can get. This is how duality works. When something is at its extreme hottest, is also when it's at its extreme coldest. When something is at its extreme coldest, is also when it's at its extreme hottest. We may have never seen something as hot as absolute zero before. So we may never be able to contain something at, an explosion at absolute zero. An explosion at absolute heat. The absolute hottest something can get. So if we're not cautious, we may create a massive nuclear explosion. Something far more dangerous than we think it is. But, the sun is hot. Because the sun is hot, it automatically means the sun is also very cold. From our perspective, the sun is hot. From a different perspective, the sun is also cold. From our perspective, the sun isn't the earth isn't moving. From the perspective of the earth, from the perspective of the sun, the earth is always moving. From our perspective, standing on the earth is flat. From the perspective of someone living in space, the earth is round. From one perspective, a magnet is positive. From another perspective, a magnet is negative. From one perspective, you are short. From another perspective, you are tall. From one perspective, the earth is large. From another perspective, the earth is small. From one perspective, absolute zero is at its cold, is the coldest temperature. from another perspective, is the hottest temperature. And this is what you need to be careful of. Duality, this is a world of duality. And since this is a world of duality, temperature must also follow that duality. From one perspective, you're on the left. From another perspective, you're on the right. From one perspective, you're sitting down on the ground. From the perspective of the moon, you're high up in the air. This is what you need to be cautious of. Perspective determines our reality. Perspective determines whether the earth is flat or round. Perspective determines whether the earth is moving or not moving. Perspective determines whether an atom is positive or negatively charged. Perspective determines whether a magnet is positive or negative. Perspective determines whether you're tall or you're short. You're large or you're small. You're hot or you're cold. Perspective. And scientists are only seeing one perspective when it comes to absolute zero. They only see the perspective when absolute zero means cold. They don't see the perspective when absolute zero means extreme heat. The hottest thing in the world is also at absolute zero. So that's what you need to be cautious of. I pray for everyone's safety and understanding. I know it's kind of hard to talk on this episode, to explain what I'm trying to say, because I'm kind of cold and also, kind of tired. So I'm cold and tired. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes in this world. I pray for everyone's safety and understanding, and also everyone's good health. Amen. Enjoy your day and enjoy your life.